Okay, hi everybody. We're going to start. We're going to give you another minute or two to finish off the donuts and the beignets back there. But no schmoozing. Just take the beignets and come on up. Whoa, those lights are bright. Okay, I think we'll get ready to get started. We have an hour for today, and it's great to see you. I am impressed that just like everybody at every university, you've managed to sit in the farthest reaches of the chairs instead of like gathering a little bit in so we can have a conversation. But I actually think I know better than to try and change that. So I want to welcome you all. I'm Lisa Berkman. I'm the current president of PAA, and along with Jim Ramo has been my fearless partner through all of this. We've really had the pleasure of planning the program and seeing how it went in first person and that sort of thing. So I want to, first of all, introduce a couple of people who have really made this meeting happen. And then have some reflections and some time for conversations. So in terms of our staff, officers, and board members, I really, really want to thank Danielle, who's still at work, Betsy, who I just met for the first time in person. It's like so great to see people who aren't this small. Mary Jo Hoeksema, who I've known for a long time, actually, from APC, who I think does fearless and incredibly important work for us. Francesca Morton, who was great. And I don't think, is John Thomas here? Okay, who is our demography editor, and talk about people who have a hard job. I think we've had a lot of conversations with them, and I think demography is one of the things we want to keep talking about in terms of making it flourish, but he has really worked very tirelessly. And the wizard of Mirror Smart and all things organizational, Bobby Westmoreland. Bobby told me sometime around January, it would be good if we talked every week. Like, what about like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning? And then Jim was in Japan, so we had these 7 o'clock. We could either talk at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. We had two windows, neither of which were optimal. But Bobby really made it work, and huge thanks for planning all this. And I have to say the posters were without a hitch, and the judges, it just seemed like it went really, really well. So thank you, and all the board members who are, I hope, in the room. I thank you, and also for sitting through our Tuesday and Wednesday strategic planning, which was like both very useful and I would just say very long for those of you who sat through it. But super helpful, and I think puts us on a good stead. So I had some general thoughts about the meeting, which was, first of all, it was the first meeting that I had planned, along with Jim, fully. And while and probably we've all participated in reviewing papers and organizing sessions, I want to say the magnitude of the job is really, really a lot, big, and I'm very glad Jennifer and Susan are going to take this over next year, and I want to congratulate the next president and vice president, Jennifer Glass and Susan, who I saw earlier, for doing it. Bob had told me in the beginning, oh, it's really the biggest job in the summer, and I thought, the summer? Okay, but that is when it was the biggest job to plan out. But I think the fruits of the planning, and really what I didn't quite realize, or maybe intellectually but not so emotionally, is how much this is a bottom-up organization, that it really truly depends on how many submissions get submitted to each session, and how much good energy the organizers and creativity and intellectual orientation the people who are organizing it have. And I feel like when you look at our agenda, I feel like the people spoke, that when you look at our agenda, it was really broad. It covered a lot of topics that I don't remember fully from other years, and also multiple sessions on things. So in terms of planning it, it was felt to me, and maybe to you too, both like a bit of a love fest in seeing everybody for the first time, really without, without the caution and the hybrid that we had last year, which I liked quite a lot. But like this was just felt a leap forward, like, okay, we can really be together, we can talk, we can go out to dinner, we can see each other. And I think the sessions were really exciting. So I would only say in the future that we should all be encouraging people to submit, that's kind of primarily the way that we get a new agenda on the table, and that when you're asked to volunteer to lead a session, say yes, and bring your creativity to it. Bring your commitment to, we asked you because you have like a depth of expertise in a field, and super important to reflect that orientation. And with that, I think comes a lot of diversity of fields, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of where people come from in countries, local, global, in terms of race and ethnicity and gender. Like with that comes that diversity. And at the same time, I think after our strategic planning, we're very, very committed, and we'll hear some more about diversity and inclusion from Tyson, but I think we're increasingly aware how intentionally we forget a lot and don't include the kinds of things that would actually be transformative. So I think in terms of thinking about nominations committees, leadership committees, and having a genuine commitment to act, to diversify our membership, we will succeed in doing that. The other thing I want to say is, after having gone through that 2 days of organizational planning, where mostly I would say we focused on all the things that we could do better or haven't done as well as we might, when I went to the mixer, and then Jim emailed, I think, to past leadership, future leadership, us, like that mixer was amazing. For those of you who saw it, it was like, I think the median age had to have been about, maybe it wasn't 25, but like, it wasn't 40, I can tell you that. It was like somewhere 20s, 30s. I was super glad that we had a lot of food, because that was clearly dinner for some enormous number of graduate students, postdocs, people who were here for the first time, and incredibly diverse group. Incredibly. I sort of walked through, and first of all, I hardly knew anybody. And I always think I know, like, I don't know half, but like I think I know a third of people or something. And it was all new people. It was just great, great energy. So it was an ode, and we shouldn't feel so bad. I think we're more diverse than we think. I think we have a young group coming in, which was really encouraging, that we wouldn't kind of age out of demography. And our pyramid wouldn't be, increasingly like this, that at least it would like stay like this, if not a little bit like that. So I thought it was a great ode to that, and that mixer was just a huge success. And I don't know how you all were felt about it, but I thought it was amazing. And Jim sent this email around that everybody kind of signed on to, said, wow. The other thing is that being part of the leadership this year, I feel like for real, has felt very, very energizing and hopeful, and with lots of opportunities to move the organization forward in ways that we're all committed to doing it. My agenda personally is I really feel important that I feel it's important that population science, broadly defined, includes demographers and economists and people in public health and epidemiologists, and I think it's reflected in our meeting. It's not always reflected in our language, but like being part of it and having those conversations, both when they're challenging and there's pushback, as well as when they're embracing, is really important. It's just a very, very important conversation for us to have, even if it's hard sometimes. I think one of the things on that strategic planning was, are you conflict avoidant? And I don't know about you all, but like I definitely, fall on the spectrum of like, it would be really nice if everybody were just nice, which, doesn't always happen. So I really want to thank everybody during that time for engaging in a very sincere and deep conversation and recognizing that we are different, like we have different commitments, and that it's a big umbrella. That PAA, what I love about PAA is that it's a big umbrella. And finally, I just want to say a word about COVID, just because all our lives have been around COVID for so long, that it feels really good, even if we're not actually on the other side. It feels like we're on the other side to do this, and this in-person meeting really felt great. So I think I'm going to turn it over. We can talk a little bit about strategic updates maybe after. Maybe I'll come, like when we have new business, I'll finish up some of the things if you don't wrap it up and Tyson doesn't, and come back to that. But why don't I turn it over? Actually, let's see, is Michelle actually goes, not Danielle? Is that the way we work? Okay.
Green button. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for waking up and joining us this morning. Where are the slides? Go back. Well, then we can start here because this is very. There we go. What? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about money and people this morning. And I think I'll just start by saying, in general, we are in a very good place at PA right now. That's the overarching message. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where we've come from in the last 3 years. But in general, I want to say that I'm very, very pleased to stand here and be able to say we are in pretty good shape. So this is just a graph about our profits and losses over the last couple of years. And so that middle line, I think it's the zero. I don't have my glasses on. I left them down there. It's kind of a break-even point, and what you can see is that in 1920, we had to cancel our meeting. Well, it's a problem now because I need 2 pairs of glasses, one to see that, and then a different pair to see this. So. But basically in 1920 we canceled the meeting. We had some financial issues. Having the virtual meeting in 2021 really allowed us to generate quite a bit of income because the virtual meeting is actually fairly cheap. We were able to get out of the hotel contract because nobody could travel, but we still brought in the the cost of registration, and the meeting was very easy to put on Zoom. Last year in 21-22, we had the hybrid meeting because the pandemic began to roar again, and that was actually a very expensive meeting. The cost of being able to do dual modes was incredibly expensive, and on top of that, because we did a hybrid meeting, many people did not come. If you were in Atlanta last year, you'll remember it was a fairly small meeting, and so we had a really big hotel penalty to pay. And so because of that, we really lost money last year. But the good news is that this meeting, the attendance has exceeded expectations. In case you were just catching on to this, our main source of income is the meeting. And so right now we're projected to be in really good shape. So we have seemed to have rebounded and come out on the other side. And I know that Columbus is going to be just as good next year. And we're going to, yes. And we're going to have phenomenal attendance at that meeting and keep it up and keep that line going back up in a positive direction. Okay, so on top of the annual meeting, these are some other ways that we've been generating revenue. One of the things that Danielle has been fabulous about, and I'm continuing to beat the drum with, is that we shouldn't just need to rely on the annual meeting to generate money. So Danielle's been fabulous about helping to find new revenue streams. And so this year we had an applied demography conference in Annapolis, and it was a smashing success. I don't know if anybody attended it, but it generated some significant revenue for the organization. And that meeting, if you're interested in starting to attend the applied meeting, if you haven't, it's every other year it's in person, and then on the off years it is virtual. We now have a building, I think you all know, and that building is generating revenue in the terms of we now have another organization renting part of the building, and so that rental income is bringing in money for the organization. The PAA staff also manages and coordinates services for multiple other organizations, and so that brings in income to the organization. And they serve as the coordinating center for Next Gen Pop, for that program that is, yay, yes, yay, Next Gen Pop. Yeah, and so we generate some revenue from that, from being the coordinating center. And then we have several grants. We have a grant of about $150,000 that helps support operation. And then there's 45,000, is that right? I can't read mine. For the undergraduate pipeline and Next Gen Prop program. And then our Career Center generates about $7,500 for us. So these are some ways outside of the meeting that we're starting to generate revenue, but again, all positive. Yay. Expenses, I think the big thing to note about expenses and things to think in terms of being forward-looking are, first of all, like everything else, inflation is a factor, and so our expenses have been going up, especially in terms of things like putting on this meeting this year. We had great attendance, so it hasn't hurt us significantly. But, you know, I just saw the report, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I forget, it's Blur's Day now, that, you know, the feds are saying that they are seeing us sliding into a recession next year. So next year could be more expensive. But a couple of things we're trying to do to control expenses are, first of all, the staff does a ton of work. We're not adding new staff to PAA right now. And we're really trying to think about where we can keep expenses down when we have a choice. So for example, there was a lot of thoughtfulness in terms of like having beignets this morning instead of mimosas, right? So thinking about how to keep beverage and food costs down at the meeting where we can. And then this is just a state of the reserve. So in terms of thinking about not only our yearly annual budget and what we're generating in terms of the meetings and the other revenue streams, this is what we have in our investment accounts right now. We have about $1.3 million. And then because we've invested in the building is now worth about $770,000. So in total, this gives us enough, the estimate that Danielle's projected is this gives us enough reserves that we could basically make it through a year and a half of the organization in terms of expenses and be okay. So that's a pretty nice place to be as an organization. And so again, the general message, it is very nice to sit here this year and say, we are in good shape. And again, just like Lisa talked about in terms of the organization coming out on the other side of COVID, you can really see that in our finances. And the other place you can see this is in our membership. And I think that the nice thing that it's really nice to see is when you look at our membership, it is just keeps going up. So 2021, our membership was down a little bit. So before 2021, we were always around 3,000. In 2021, pandemic, people had lots on their plates. Our membership fell to about 2,700. But as you can see, we're steadily rebounding. And so now we're up to about 3,390. The other thing, you can see the dip in the annual meeting last year. 2021, again, was virtual, and so that's actually really impressive that many people signed up in Zoom world, right, for a virtual meeting. I think it speaks to how much we all love PAA. And then we dipped last year during the hybrid, but again, we're on the rebound again this year. We're going in the right direction, and the Applied Demography Conference is small, but it's staying steady. And again, I encourage you, if you are interested in Applied Demography, to come and join that meeting in the future. Does anybody have any questions? I just will sum it up and again and say that we are in good shape. And it is really, really nice to be able to report that to you. And I want to give a big thank you to Danielle, because this is really her hard work to make sure that we stay on track with everything. So thank you very, very much. So, yes, Jennifer. Well, so the year where we had the big dip, I can go back. Oh, no, I can't. They took the slides. Oh, there we go. So she's, let me pull up the graph, and I can tell you her question. So she's talking about the big dip, the 900,000 dip, and if this is something that is a blip, or if this is something that we should have fear that could happen again in the future. And has this happened in the past? And part of the reason she's concerned is because our reserves, if we have, basically that would eat up a significant chunk of our reserves if we did that again. And that is generally just a blip, and it's a COVID thing.
A lot to do with the hotel contract.
Yeah.
And the dip is the 400, the 900 is the virtual meeting year with the giant donation.
Okay. So part of it is, so then in general, we break even, right? So in the 1 year, because we had a giant donation, an anonymous donation, we generated a lot, so we had this big, so you take that away for the next year and then have the hybrid meeting. And then basically the hotel contract last year really caused us problems, because essentially we had to sell so many rooms, and we didn't come anywhere close because people were still hesitant to come back to the meeting, so we paid a big penalty for that. And in fact, that's just something else. Part of the reason we shouldn't have to do that again is Danielle's changing the way that she's thinking about negotiating contracts. Even this year, she worked very hard to reduce the number of rooms we were responsible for, so that didn't happen again. And we're writing some other clauses, or I said she's writing some other clauses into future contracts. So for example, if something happens in terms of state laws, that we have out clauses, and so that there are more ways that we have out clauses. Last year, I think because we were just post-pandemic, the hotel was very stingy. They've lost a lot of money. They were not giving on anything in terms of giving us a break outside of a future meeting that they negotiated with us that could have potentially put us in more financial jeopardy in the future, and so we said no. Other questions? I can't see anybody in the middle. All right, then let me see who it's. Mary Jo, you're next. Oh, yeah.
I was wondering. Hi, I'm Jonathan. I was wondering, for years the Sociology Association talks about declining numbers, so it's really reassuring to see a 400-person uptick.
Yes.
And I think about sustainability, and I'm curious if you could tell us more about what kinds of new members that is. Students versus professional, for example.
So I only know our membership breakdown by age, and I would say we're actually pretty evenly spread out between new professionals, people in mid-career, and people in later career. And then we have decline, post-65, is that what it is? Yeah, post-65. So in terms of like an age pyramid, we're a pretty healthy structure. But I don't know the breakdown of professionals versus students versus. But I can say that you're right, like the American Sociological Association, their numbers continue to drag. But even before the pandemic, we were pretty steady too. And so we really are an organization that has stayed pretty steady and just had a COVID dip and have come out on the other side. And there was a lot of concern when I became Secretary Treasurer a couple of years ago that we might not pick back up. And I think it just speaks to, like, I mean, basically Danielle kind of calls us a cult in a good way, right? Like we all really, really like each other, and it's a pretty welcoming environment, and we continue to bring students in. And so at the moment, I'm not particularly worried about us going in the direction of ASA, even though I know that, and that's not just ASA, I mean, professional memberships in general are declining, and we're doing okay. Anyone else? All right, you're up, Mary Jo.
Well, hi everyone. I'm Mary Jo Huxema, and I'm Director of Government and Public Affairs for PAA, and I do my work with the support of the Government and Public Affairs Committee, which is ably led by our chair, Dr. Vita Marilani, who left last night, so I can't ask Vita to stand up, but she works really hard, so if you ever have a chance to interact with Vita, be sure to thank her for all of the work she does leading our committee. But with the guidance and the support of the committee, I work to ensure that your agencies of interest, the federal agencies of interest, receive robust funding to support the research and the data-related activities that are so important to you. Our priority agencies are the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, Census Bureau, National Center for Health Statistics, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I don't just work independently, I also work by collaborating with coalitions that exist primarily in DC with like-minded organizations that also care about these agencies. So, for example, I go to meetings of over a dozen coalitions, but some of the ones I spend most of my time on are the Consortium of Social Science Associations, which Danielle is actually helping to lead that organization currently as chair of the board. The Coalition for Health Funding, the Census Project, and a whole host of friends of groups. We've got Friends of NCHS, Friends of BLS, Friends of National Institute on Aging. So this is how I get my work done on your behalf. I'm pleased to report that, as I said in some previous meetings, some of you might have heard me state that we did receive strong levels of funding for all of our agencies of interest in the final fiscal year 2023 appropriations bills that Congress passed. Including the National Center for Health Statistics received its first meaningful increase since fiscal year 2010. And that was because of, in part, Congressman Fitzpatrick's efforts. That's why he got the award that I announced last night. We were also pleased that Congress last year accepted report language that I worked hard to get adopted into a report accompanying our funding bills, praising the National Institutes of Health and their support of population research. So yes, that's very good. This year's been really busy because we, of course, have a new Congress. We have had a lot of turnover. We lost 73 members due to retirement in the last Congress. And because of that, we also have a lot of new staff. So last month, PA sponsored a small targeted advocacy day in which your officers and some invited scientists and applied demographers came to DC, and they conducted over 40 meetings, most of them in person and some virtual over in one day. We use that opportunity to really talk about our funding needs and to promote the funding needs of our agencies of interest and to encourage, once again, the adoption of our appropriations report language in the NIH report. Other policy priorities we're currently tracking include the revisions to the federal race and ethnicity data collection standards. There is an open comment period that's been extended to April 27th. After PA is over, I'm going to be issuing an action alert to all of you, encouraging you as individuals to weigh in since we have a few more weeks to amplify some of the themes that we communicated in our comments to OMB, and hope you'll join us. We also have been working to ensure that the behavioral and social sciences are included in the new ARPA-H, that's the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health agency that the Biden administration has created. We want to make sure that you guys are able to benefit from the billions of dollars that are going to this new agency. And another major policy policy priority for us is ensuring that the National Center for Health Statistics benefits from the new proposed reorganization of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Some future activities we have planned through the rest of the year include hosting our first in-person briefing on Capitol Hill. We haven't done one since 2019. We did a few virtual, but we plan to bring that back later this summer. We're known for sponsoring an ice cream social. It's super popular. So I've already had staff asking me, are you going to have the ice cream social along with your briefing? Yes, we will. We also do a briefing series for the Government Accountability Office, which is the investigative arm of Congress. We do 2 briefings for them a year, and those will also resume in person in June and November. And then lastly, we bring together an invited group of scientists who meet with the directors of various NIH institutes in the fall, and hoping to do those in person, but certainly we'll at least do them virtually in the fall. So please be on the lookout for action alerts and respond. We are expecting this appropriations process to be a difficult one, and but when we know we're much more effective when you guys weigh in as constituents and help us amplify the messages of support for your research and for the agencies that we know are so important for you and your students and your colleagues in order to do the important research that you do. It's an honor to represent you, and please know that I'm always available to you if you ever have any questions or concerns. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. All right, well, thank you.
Thanks. Can I go back? All right, there we go. Well, good morning. Thank you all for showing up bright and early. We see who the diehards are, committed to the organization, especially in New Orleans. Thank you. It's really good to see so many faces. So my name is Tyson Brown, and I have the privilege of serving on the board as well as co-chairing the DEI committee along with Hetty Lee, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but she sends her welcome. And so I was asked to give a really brief overview of some of the history and activities that the organization, that the committee has partaken in over the last 3.5 years or so. So I promise to keep it brief, but I look forward to any questions that you might have as well. All right, so a DEI task force was actually created in 2019, and that was led by Hetty Lee, who had a number of members who were doing the work on the ground as well. And our first things that we did was we created a charge. And we went through this, we thought about it, we looked at what other organizations were doing, we also try to think outside the box. And so we came up with this charge, but of course this is a fluid thing, and so we expect that it will evolve over time. But we also started thinking about all the opportunities that the organization has to really broaden the tent and be more inclusive for its members, present and future. And so we're thinking that, our thinking is essentially that, DEI should really apply to all aspects of the organization, from the membership to the session topics, as well as opportunities for presenting research and serving on committees, and even leadership roles. And again, we recognize that our understanding of this will evolve over time. And then the big news is, don't want to bury this, late in 2019, we were officially approved as a standing PAA DEI committee. Right, so this is a permanence, and it really demonstrates the organization's commitment to these principles. All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the activities of the last several years. So in 2020, it's a little bit of a blur, but we met a lot. It's that startup cost and thinking through what are we going to do and how are we going to do it and how are we going to do it virtually. And so we really got to know one another from a distance in a sense. And so we hosted a webinar talking about transformative allyship, and we were really fortunate to have many senior leaders come and join and share their voice, which is really great. I can't remember all the individuals, but I think maybe Bob Hammer, Chris Wilderman. I'm sorry if the folks I'm forgetting. And I also believe that we had several other webinars, and again, it's a bit of a blur, 2020, so please forgive me. And then in 2020, we helped to organize and promote free registration for underrepresented minorities, undergraduates, to attend the virtual PA conference, right? And so I thought, this is a really nice opportunity to think about the pipeline nice and early. And then we also helped to secure an organizational effectiveness grant to examine the impact of existing DEI efforts, identify what we can do better, and also conduct a governance review through a DEI lens. And I can't emphasize enough the role that Danielle Stout played throughout all this. I mean, anyone who interacts with PA knows that she is behind the scenes and she's fierce and she's brilliant. So thank you so much, Danielle, for all that you've done over the last several years. So then we, in 2022, we ended up conducting sponsored through DEI, conducted a climate survey to understand the member experiences and views on DEI efforts, particularly within the organization, thinking about what has been done and what should be done or should not be done. And so look forward to hearing about that in the future. And again, this was supported through the grant and Sharon Newport's efforts. All right, and then fast forwarding to 22, 23, we developed and launched the PA Undergraduate Pipeline Program. And so this program really aims to introduce demographic research and careers and demography and information about applying to graduate school, right? We know that this is sort of a hidden curriculum and it's not totally understood by especially first gen and folks who haven't been traditionally represented within the academy. And we're targeting especially undergraduates at minority serving institutions at local PAA annual meetings. So next year we'll be looking to see what, hopefully partnering with folks in Ohio and perhaps, in the broader Midwest. We also welcomed this year, our inaugural year of actually getting them on the ground. We had 15 undergraduates who attended as part of this program from Xavier, from Tulane, as well as West Alabama, and a number of other universities as well. And so I just want to thank all the organizers and the presenters and the staff, and obviously the funders who actually helped make this a success. And if you had an opportunity to interact or see them, you're probably like me and were really energized. These are really bright young people who are really enthusiastic about jumping into the field of the demography. And so it's neat to see our present and likely our future. I feel really inspired by that. All right. On a related note, we've also been organizing demographers of color receptions over the last several years. And this is really cool. I don't know if any, I know that many of you had an opportunity to stop by last night. We had over 80 people come through, and this was really energizing. It skewed younger, so a lot of grad students, postdocs, assistant professors, but we also had a number of senior folks, the board. Many board members came through, and Danielle, in all of her infinite brilliance, was able to get very senior folks, leaders in the population world from the White House and also the census to come and attend and talk about some of their efforts. And also they came here because we're ripe for recruiting young people into some of those positions. And so that was a really cool opportunity to partner. And and you see the pictures here. There's a lot of energy and excitement in the room, and I think that bodes well for what we're going to be doing in the future. And I just think that given the breadth and the depth of research available at PAA, it's a really perfect opportunity to engage with early career scholars. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge all the effort from the DEI committee members, past and present. Hetty has been amazing, and again, Danielle Stout has also been really incredible in helping us support us and moving these things forward. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes. That's a great question. I think we'd love to have more. So the question was, is there an international focus? You mean for the undergraduates or with respect to DEI? That's something that has been a big part of the conversation. Absolutely. I think that we actually have, I think 25% of folks attending PAA, I believe, on average in the last several years, are international, and a lot of international topics are covered, even by our domestic scholars. But I think that's a really key part, and hopefully will remain so. I think that's been a big part of the discussion over the last several weeks. So thank you.
Well, I think the reports have been really encouraging and shown you that PAA, the state of PAA is pretty good right now. Financially, I think in terms of our mix, in terms of our commitment to new things. There are a few things I didn't mention, then I just want to open it up. I just want to emphasize that the Applied Demography Conference was a new thing in person, right? That this was the first time and seemed super successful. I've personally met a bunch of people who work for government associations and have been out there in the field doing really good work, and it seems really important. So I just want to say thanks for all of their efforts, and good to continue this, and to really recognize also that demography, the journal, has really gone through some transitions. It's gone from Mark Hayward being editor for a number of years to Sarah Kernan at University of Washington, and Sarah couldn't be here today, but she's going to connect with you in the near future. And working with John Thomas, and who's also a demography editor, and Duke to work towards open access and also to make the journal sustainable and more open is one of the key important things that we're going to do. So at this time, I think I've finished, like we've covered most of the major things we wanted to. We just have, if there are any new questions or open business things you'd like to talk about or put on the agenda for next year for Jennifer and Susan to deal with. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think actually it's hard.
Success. I'm wondering, because at my university, they recently had some consortium with other universities in Hong Kong to agree to have open access for Wiley and Cambridge University Press journals. And I'm curious from your end, maybe you don't know what's going on that front, but because I think a lot of them are organized by these publishers like Wiley.
Right,
and
right.
So I'm wondering in US universities and European universities and other universities, or maybe more on the periphery of academia in the world, social science in the world, demography, what do you understand to be like the status quo in terms of, and also the trajectory of moving toward universities funding open access? Because those two journals, it's kind of interesting because then it provides an incentive to submit to those journals versus all the others if they're offering open access and the impact factors are that different.
Yeah. So I think I'll ask Daniel to answer maybe specifically, but I do want to say that my impression, having listened to this, is that the status quo is there's no status quo, is that it's completely transitional, is that every time you think you have a model, or we've thought we've had a model, it hasn't worked quite right, and we've wanted to consider another model. So I think we're on the total frontier of open access, and whether universities pay or individual members pay, or whether the journal is supposed to be sustainable and just provide this, and what it means for lower middle income countries in terms of access, all of that is like very much up in the air. It's just something we struggle with, and I'm not sure, I don't think any of us actually feels like we have the total solution right now. I would say we're in the struggling stage. But Danielle, can you, oh, there you are. Say however you think, where you think we are.
So I agree with Lisa. In the U.S. market, at least, it's very much Wild West almost. But the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy came out with a pretty significant memo requiring requiring federally funded research in the U.S. to be open access. And right now, they're in the comment or the development phase with the larger funding institutions like NIH to kind of figure out exactly how they're going to do this. But as far as I know, there's not a big group or consortium that's trying to push everyone to open access. One thing I would suggest is our publisher, Duke University Press, is here in the booth, and Rob Dilworth is our contact. He will know a lot more about the overall landscape, so I'd suggest stopping by and talking to him.
Great. Other questions? Yeah?
Apologies for asking a second question. At least I looked for hands first. First of all, I really love that demography is open access because it's like one of the ways that I feel that PAA reflects my personal values. And I'm fortunate to be in an organization where it's either we either try and get it on the grant, and if we can't, we find the money somewhere. One question I wanted to follow up on is the state laws thing. I wanted to know if you specifically meant like abortion and trans laws, and when does that flexibility kick in? Like, what's the first year that we have a contract with laws, exit clause things?
I think that's let me just say that I think our sentiment with regard to open access is completely with you. I don't think anybody doesn't want open access. The question is how to finance it. What's the model that will make a journal sustainable and maintain open access? And that is a struggle. But I think philosophically, open access has been terrific for everybody. Yeah. No, terrific. But why don't you talk about the meetings, because they're lined up for a number of years.
So just so everyone understands, when we sign a meeting contract, it's usually 4 to 6 years in advance. So, for example, last year, Georgia passed some ridiculous voting laws. To get out of that contract would have basically drained our reserves. So, and it, just so, I guess, a baseline, so you guys all understand. The clauses that we have in our contract about state laws and being able to get out of the contract focus, well, one were written like 4 years ago, but they focus on impacting an attendee's participation. So for example, if let's say we had a contract in Charlotte, North Carolina, a couple of years ago when they had their weird bathroom bill and trying to dictate what bathroom people could use. That the clause that we have in our contract is designed to be able to get out of those situations that would directly impact attendee participation at our meeting. And I'm going to speak from a personal level. As much as I would like to get out of every state that hampers reproductive rights and basically anything else that's gross, gun
laws. Gun laws.
Gun laws. You know, there's just a limit to what we can put into a contract if it's not impacting the attendee experience. So when it's, in this case, like in Louisiana, when we thought about, Roe versus Wade was overturned, what can we do? Staff did a lot of research on, okay, what if somebody needs that care while we're here? What can we do? How can we be prepared? We'll do our best to mitigate any sort of impact that these gross laws have on our attendees. But in terms of that clause, it's very much focused on if you're here at the meeting, some law makes your day-to-day experience unpleasant. It allows us to get out of the contract. Usually they want us to go to the same brand somewhere else, which isn't a big deal. So that's kind of the overview of that.
I could just add, just because this is also a good place to say, next year is Columbus, Ohio. April 17th going on. The next year is DC, and the next year is St. Louis in Missouri. And one of the things that we've thought about doing is that it's hard to get out of a contract. It's not so hard not to make a contract. So if we can design better for things that seem like states that we do want to be in, that's a lot easier. It's very challenging to get out of a contract. It's almost impossible, really, for us to get out of a contract for these kind of things. So, and we're also a large organization, so there aren't that many states and places. But I think the commitment to be in some places that are supporting laws that we generally, as an association, support seems important.
And what I would add to that too is, even if we end up in states where they have policies that we don't agree with personally, it's not necessarily a bad thing to stay there because you're supporting people who need help. You are, this meeting provides this hotel with a ton of money, and who staffs this hotel? It's predominantly people of color. It's predominantly folks in a lower socioeconomic situation. If we leave, that hurts those people. So, and honestly, and this I'm going to say is really my personal opinion, the state of Louisiana wouldn't care if we left. We're a drop in the bucket for them. So if we can come to these states, not actively try to go to states like this, but if we're here, let's make a difference. Let's support the people here and do what we can.
And we did a local, I think our effort was to balance this with a commitment to community organizations, so that last night we had a Planned Parenthood in New Orleans area, which I think you were at, right? That was going to also counter some of the effects and give us an opportunity to contribute to people who were very committed to the cause for this. So I think we should keep moving. I'm sort of wary of the time, and I think the drawings are the next thing, and then we adjourn, and I know how important the drawings are.
All right, I get to do the fun part. So just real quick, there's 3 prizes. The first prize goes to the first prize person. It's 2 nights stay at the Hyatt Regency in Columbus for our meeting next year. Second prize goes to the next 2 people, complimentary registration for PAA 2024. You're sensing a theme here. And our third prize will be for the next 3 people and a $50 gift card. There's a local food court called The Market or something. It's really cool. Okay, so on your app we have where you could check in and gain points. So our first place winner is one of our Next Gen Pop folks, Braden Roth. Congratulations. Oh, Braden, could you stand up and wave to everyone, please? Thank you. All right, our next 2 winners are Shang Li and Alyssa Kamara. If you could both stand, we will provide you with the complimentary registration. And our next 3 after that are Emmanuel Agu. You have to be present to win. Oh, maybe not. Carolina Vieira. Oh, yay. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah Patterson. And Gladys Martinez. So those are our winners, and thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming to this 8 o'clock meeting, and Danielle for organizing, really being the force, and Bobby Westmoreland again for really having organized, and Danielle for having helped with everything, but Sunal, the speech last night, was really, really inspiring and beautiful and made me totally have a pit in my stomach. So, to plan for the next year, but it was wonderful, beautiful speech and enormous contribution. So I really want to thank you for all the mentorship that you gave us in terms of doing this and the leadership that you gave to PAA for the last year, and just enormous thanks. And we are adjourned.